province. I think that's really important note to let community know. And then our urban Indigenous community is also going to be looked after. I know like at past community engagements we've talked about how the local communities want to look after their guests, because traditionally that's what you do. You look after your guests and you make them feel welcome. So that's one of the reasons, one of the most important messages to get out of this part of the legislation for our urban Indigenous community. It also talks about Jordan's principle, and that is also included in our law. We want our children and family to get the services that they need, and then not have to worry about money after. So to ensure that they know that and that they're going to get looked after. I'm going to pass.
Question.
Yes.
Would it cover the non-Indigenous guests residing in the territory?
The whole legislation?
Yeah.
This is just strictly for our Indigenous youth
Okay.
and children and families. Yeah. I'm going to pass this over to Erica.
Sorry, can I just add? So sometimes there might be examples where we will, because of Bill C-31 or because of the bloodline and things like that, as long as we can declare that somebody has ancestry or bloodline to a nation, I think this law would apply. And as long as the family is willing to comply with the process, that's what we're looking for. So it's an alternative. It's going to be our law, and I think if families want to walk in through this process that are linked somehow to a nation or this process, we're not going to deny them. We can't just say, oh, there's the MCFD process. So we could have, and we do have relatives that are active members that don't have status or have, does that make sense?
Yeah, I was thinking like sometimes within nations adopting other families that are not native, this would cover, and say that the whole family lived on the reserve or in the territory.
It
was
can.
adopted by the nation.
Yeah, it would have to be led by the nation through that process. So some of them could fall into that process. It's almost like, who do we give traditional names to? Or who are allowed to be involved in certain ceremonies? It's kind of like that.
Thank you. Sorry for interrupting.
An Indigenous guest is actually a term that we have to define in our law, and actually something that we really need feedback for, because as an organization, becoming the arbitrators of indigeneity and be like, you count and you don't count is not a position that CO wants to be in. And so I think within our law right now, we say member or entitled to be a member of a nation. Also, we're using the bill or section 35 of the Constitution. Should we be doing that? These are all questions. Or if they belong to another Indigenous governing body. So trying to figure out how to include as many people as we need to, but also how to weight those waters in a good way. So yeah, any thoughts on that is really good.
I have another question. Sorry. I was just thinking, what if the First Nation family doesn't want the nation involved with their children? And I just talk about this because the role that I do at work, we do sometimes run into this, where maybe the First Nations family might be urban, so they've never been on the reserve, and maybe they move onto the reserve and things don't go as well as we plan, that we think it's a really welcoming environment, but sometimes it isn't. And so where does that parent sit with her rights, he or she? And getting help if the nation isn't supportive and maybe there's some bad things are happening against that family. So where does that family fit? Where she's like, no, I don't want anything to do with my nation. And that kind of situation, because it's, we're usually, usually we say it's gonna work out, but sometimes it doesn't work out, so it just, because I do, deal with that in my line of work, so, yeah.
I think, or, I would say, like, within this process, and Bruce, if you wanna comment too, I'm just talking from the legal perspective of looking at the law, is that really this law is trying to be really family driven. So understanding that families have their own laws and ways of being, and that there's the nation, but trying to kind of piece out those parts, and actually this is where I'm kind of like, oh, and I'm gonna explain a little bit of how we foresee this, so that kids aren't being trapped in political processes or whatnot, and that the family actually, being covered under this law means that your family has say and can make your own decisions, and it's not getting moved to the nation level, and it's keeping families as their primary decision makers. And so while some people still might be like, I just don't even want to be covered by that, that's kind of the point of contention, and how do we navigate that?
They wouldn't really have a choice.
No, and Indigenous guests, as we're looking at it under the law, might actually have a choice to kind of opt in and say we want to be served here versus by MCMD, but for the member nations, so for South, it would be passed by South and say this is our law, and there would be no options. And so that's why the consultation is so important, to be like, does this work?
Yeah, that's just my only worry in the work that I do in child protection law, is that it doesn't always work out, and when it doesn't work out, it really doesn't work out, and it's just that family's just stuck under this. Yeah. We're like, housing, it can go as far as housing, they're not gonna fix their houses. And, yeah, it's a nightmare, quite frankly, yeah, so.
Sorry, if I could just add, I think that's part of the change. And I think if there's change coming, it's not just one thing that's gonna change. And some of the nations that are in the modern day treaty process, for example, have to submit something. And some of the nations are taking this document and they're gonna submit it as part of the treaty, as a draft for now. But at the same time, if there's that accountability and transparency, so a family comes through the door and says, I don't agree with that. It can be adopted or simplified. It doesn't mean we need to light the fire. It doesn't mean we need to have the antis. But there is still that transparency piece or the accountability piece that we're accountable to each other. And that's what I talked about, the cultural piece. Some might be Siawan, some might be Quakers, some might be that culture, right?
Yeah.
And people say we shouldn't say that's a culture, because it isn't. But in reality, when you look at the non-First Nations definition of it, it is. And it's real in our community. So some of our relatives that might be stubborn that way saying, I want nothing to do with Bruce. That whole legislation or jurisdiction doesn't count for me. I want to do something different. Unfortunately, I would say this is it. And we're going to do a better job than what's been done for us for the last little while. And I think that's what needs to be started to, that's the discussion that needs to happen. But do we need to be trained around confidentiality and all those other things? Sure we do. And do we need people around us that are professionals and expertise in this? Sure we do. We need to understand the jurisdictional law, the accountability, and the liabilities. And now what we need to also do is understand the cultural piece of it and kind of, so in reality, we're learning twice as much over the next little while than the non-First Nations that knows the jurisdiction. They do a 3-year course or get a degree. So maybe it's not the answer you're looking for, but I would say yes to be locked in. Yeah.
Thank you.
A lot of words to say that. Eh?
No.
Oh, okay. Sorry. Now we're going to get the legal or...
And this will come later in the conversation, but just to clarify, that's I think a concern that we've thought a lot through, and as Erica said, family is always the key decision maker. We want them to be the decision maker in any scenario. But if it gets to the point when someone external to the family must make a decision, it's important to think about what the governance structure of SIA is, which is that it'll be representatives from each of the member nations that will be making the decision. So it's not just like a chief eases that like worry a little
So
bit.
would families be able, are families able to have lawyers representing them?
I'm like, this is, we have
And-
this
and yes,
dispute resolution as a part down the road, which Chuck gets to talk to, because that's, we have to,
Okay.
we actually have to have something
Okay.
like that.
Because I thought I heard, but I wasn't sure if it was true, that in the Cowichan, in their new law, I don't, maybe it's not true, but that the families couldn't have lawyer representation.
A couple points, sorry. I do have a couple key points. So one is, right now people don't have a choice. They are governed by the Child Family Community Service Act. So what Bruce was saying and what Erica was saying is that the basis of this is, in the South Island, there will be, other than for things like Cowichan or Cowichan people living here, there will be 2 laws. And so the one piece is that our law will be no more imposed on Indigenous people than the current law is, and you're going to live under one or the other. For the guest community in particular, because we haven't yet had the discussions with the federal and provincial government about how you folks would indicate to us and to them that you're buying into this. I think there's probably more flexibility than there is for the 8 nations, the member nations. But in terms of the lawyers, I'll be interested after we've gone through the model whether, I don't think we'll have answered it, but I would be interested on your perspective around lawyers, because what we're proposing is true family run process, and so I would hate to see a family having some kind of meeting and have 4 lawyers sitting in on the meeting to represent them. I don't think that's how families operate. So, we'll sort of go through some of this. I think it's a great question. I'm not dismissing it at all.
Do you know if that's true about Cowichan?
Oh, no, I just wanted to
Okay.
add my comments to this,
I don't, I believe it is, but I would have to go back and read your law.
And thank you.
I will say, like, in their dispute resolution process, according to the Cowichan legislation, they're trying to have it in provincial court for a very brief period of time and then transition it into a Cowichan-based dispute resolution model where it doesn't actually go to the Canadian court system at all. And as you'll see, we're trying to do the same thing.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, I have nothing against lawyers, but, it's for me, and in this, where we're at with children, I wouldn't want to see lawyers in their person. I say that, no, not out of disrespect for them, but because we're talking about our rights to raise our children. They're ours, they belong to us, not anybody else. In our way, we're from a house, and I'm always glad we're part of it, is we have heads of families that help guide us, we have our grandmothers and our aunties that help guide us, and that's how I imagine it, is just bringing up our children, our grandchildren, in that way, with love, I'd like to see more things about, maybe have a preamble about our ways of adding love and caring and all of that, and because we get into all of these words and things, so that we keep us focused on why we're here, A child isn't just a child, In our way in the houses, we have something we call husma. It's about families. I was brought up that way. I was brought up in residential school. I'm just going to share that with you because I was 38 years old before I accepted my culture, but my elders never ever gave up on me. They kept hope on it, telling me about my histories or how I should be, and it was the community too. I lost my mom when I was 5, and I had 5 younger siblings, and the community helped us. My aunts, my how we are, what's our foundation, and, you know, he talked about it. You know, I heard some different things, you know, the ladies are our foundation, the mothers, the grandmothers. You know, we need to get back to that. You know, we talk about prevention and all of those kind of things, and he talked about alcohol being our culture, and it's still there, he's right. You know, and how are we gonna break away from that? You know, how are we gonna be? I know we have people struggling for their children, trying to fight. I used to go to these little circles with ministry. I'd be invited because I was a leader in my community, and they were so disrespectful. My aunt, she was a great grandmother. She cried. What about my right? She said, I'm a grandma. You know, I don't want to ever see that. Because, you know, that's there. They have their right. We all do. In our laws, you know. So I just wanted to say that. I have nothing against lawyers. I wanted to be a lawyer when I was young. And I told my dad that lots of times. You know, but I always think about that. We get so caught up in our ways of teaching in the universities, and it kind of comes back. I say that about residential schools too, you know, and how we treat our children when we're in cultural gatherings. Some say, well, you're not wrong. But, you know, and I think that's probably from the residential school. You know. So I just wanted to share my part on that of you know, like, one of my relatives is a lawyer.
Yeah, I agree.
Alright, well, but I'm gonna segue into SIA and talk a little bit about our structure, and more talks about how we avoid lawyers will be coming up later on. So this actually, I realized, so we have a version of this diagram for our member nations, and we also have one for our guest community. So just wanted to explain a little bit about who SIA is going to be, because part of our law, we actually have to explain, like, who is the South Island Indigenous Authority? We have to establish them, which is kind of just that legal thing, like, we exist. And we'll be a society under this law for the time being. And under the law, SIA will mostly be, up here it says, operate mostly as an oversight body, but there are a couple service delivery roles that SIA will take on under our new law because they currently don't exist in any space, and some of them we don't want to necessarily put onto a service provider, such as child and family safety team. So I'm just going to go through, I made this flow diagram. It may look confusing. I thought it looked like it made sense, but then I got my teammates who said, Erica, so confusing, why so many lines? But so for the nations, we have our families on this side, and they elect nation leadership, or however that works. Within the nation leadership, they appoint one individual to what we're calling a representative council. So that representative council is made up of members from each of the member nations that have appointed a member. For our small nations, like for example, Saigon, Pakwachin, maybe there's that one person that they both want to elect and put on the representative council. That's a possibility. And then from the representative council, which is the tie-in to our nations, they appoint a board of directors. And so as of right now, we're seeing our board made up of either 5 or 7 people, and it's very much an expert board, so focused on like those areas of specialty to run this organization. And from the board of directors, they'll be hiring an executive director, which is kind of that person making sure everything's going okay, and controlling the business affairs of SIA. And then that person, and so now we're going down our flow chart, is a regional child and family advocate. So I'm going to talk about this position actually in the next slide. So I'm going to skip it for a bit, but this is the position that's really going to oversee practice across the territory. This is a really, really important role. And from there, they're hiring a child and family safety team. We have to have a safety team, which Chuck will talk about in detail later, simply because if we don't have one and there's a safety concern, then MCFD is going to step in. So we need to have something to do it in our own way, just so that MCFD can stay out the door. And then from there, this is where it translates back into the nations, into nation-based structures. We have a nation-based floor manager and a nation-based child and family advocate. So the floor manager is a position that's going to help families facilitate and organize family meetings and gatherings. Chris is going to talk about this a little bit more and how meetings and gatherings are organized. But this is a position really saying, okay, if you want to meet to pass on a name to your child and you don't know how to do that, if you want to meet because you're worried about how your child is doing and you want to pull family together, or if you need to meet because there's actually some safety concerns going on, SIA will have a floor manager, which is parallel to the role that floor managers have in the longhouses here in the territory, to help coordinate that position. But it's like a support to families. And then we have a nation-based child and family advocate, which also will be discussed a little bit later. But this is someone who's really looking out for the community. They're in each community, but they're also connected into this larger structure. And so then, there you go, they're supporting families. They're also remaining on nation's leadership table. So this is the position that's kind of letting people know what's going on the ground within child and family services and support within a nation. So they need to stay up on the nation's leadership to let nations know what's going on. And then within the yellow in the middle, this is something that we're trying to figure out. Is this something communities want? Is having nation-based youth councils and elders councils, which then would feed into regional youth and regional elders councils. There's question marks on either side. We don't know how they get there. We don't know exactly what their position would be, but it's something that's come up within community, and so we wanted to put it up for feedback within these presentations. So April, if you want to go. So then this is the exciting one, because we're talking about Indigenous guests, and so I'm going to read this just alongside all of you, so I'm not looking over my shoulder. So as you can see, it's a little bit different, because we have different community groups putting folks into what we're calling a Council of Indigenous Guests. We know that unlike member nations, there's no organized leadership governing the Indigenous guest community here on the South Island. And trying to figure out how that's going to be coordinated is something that we're trying to figure out. So all of this is up for feedback. As Bruce was talking about that very special role of the three families of the South Island. So we're acknowledging that there's a resident Hulitan community here on the territory, a resident Kwakwaka'wakw community here on the territory, and also there's a whole number of other Indigenous groups living here within the urban community. So within each of those groups, they'll each be responsible for appointing people onto the Council of Indigenous Guests. So the resident Hulitan community will appoint one, the resident Kwakwaka'wakw community will appoint one, and then the rest of the community will have the space to appoint three. This is a big question. We don't know exactly who's appointing, how does this appointing work? But the purpose of the Council of Indigenous Guests is acknowledging that within the South Island, actually a huge part of the work within child and family services happens within the urban community. So we want to ensure that the urban community feels like their voices and their unique concerns, as well as like gifts and all of those things that they can offer, have a space to be heard within our governance structure. And so then, as you can see, it flows just the same as the nation structure. The Council of Indigenous Guests will be able to appoint someone to a representative council. So they'll be sitting with those representatives from the nations, and they'll go to the board of directors, then executive officer, and then down back into the circle. And then also, similar to the nations, is that the Indigenous guest community will have floor managers to assist the families in coordinating and supporting their meetings, as well as child and family advocates. Unlike the nations, these will probably actually have a lot within the community. There'll be more than one, because the urban community is so large here on the island. So I don't know if anyone has any big questions before I go into this
I
next
just
one.
had one.
Yeah,
I was wondering, does it cover the Métis
so
Nation?
this is a really good question. I'm like, yeah. That's something the Métis Nation of BC went and were trying to create their own Indigenous governing body to put forward their own law like any nation would. Chuck was met with Island Métis Executive Director, and now we're going up to the Métis Nation of BC to figure out what their process is, because eventually they'll have, or they want to have their own law, which is same as any nation, but whether they'll want to use our law as an interim measure before they get to that point is going to be up to them. So we actually haven't got for sure yay or nay from them so far. I don't know if
Yeah, that's fairly accurate. They haven't thought of the fact that we were creating a law and they are defined as Indigenous under the Section 35 of the Constitution Act. So if we're not going to provide any service, which is the last official word we heard from Métis Nation BC, then we'd have to write in that they're excluded from this, which would mean they would stay with the Child, Family and Community Service Act for the foreseeable future, because right now the province and the federal government aren't moving very quickly on the negotiations around Métis status in BC. Yeah.
yes, 100, I think percent. We haven't heard anything. Not too.
Bruce and I were going to, according to the executive director, she was going to try to get Bruce and I invited to the board and to have this discussion.
So I just wanted to respond to the question with regard to Métis involvement or that process. There has been discussion in the past with respect to the nation-to-nation-based dialogue. Métis was at the table because of their political process, higher up the chain of command, so to speak, I think at the national level, sending it back to British Columbia at the regional level. They've actually agreed to stand down. There was a ripple effect that happened in our region regarding the political stance that we were making in South Island. And we thought there was a bit of a pushback and there was going to be a little bit of a pushing back and forth. We did indicate to them that they're in our territory. And if they want to remain in our territory and have their own law, they need to have an affiliation agreement or a memorandum of understanding to come and ask if they need to be in our territory. So that statement has been made to them. They have come forward when we were at the South Island Wellness Society. They did agree, the local office that's here, did agree to have that meeting, and that's as far as it went. So I don't see them being involved because they, as it was indicated, they're moving forward with their own thoughts, and they haven't come back. So right now, it would be just doing our own work, excluding the Métis. But you know what? The process is, if other families want to come through that door, when we're creating the governance model around what we're doing, it will change. And I think the other piece of it is, and not to get political, but we will not have political elected leaders to the governance of how we're structuring the board of directors. So right now we have the chiefs at the table. That's going to be, needs to be thought through. It might be a lawyer, it might be a finance person, it might be, and they're not subject to change every 2 years when we have an election. And or the agencies, Hulitan, surrounded by Cedar, Neepawa, Victorian Friendship Center, South Island Wellness Society, are not going to be on the board because they are still the service provider. So they'd be in a direct conflict if they were sitting there allocating their own money. So it would be at an arm's length, and we'd be declaring that process to be fair and true, and no biases are happening. You know, how people say, oh, you get on council and you hired your cousin. You know, none of that's going to happen.
Yeah.
There's going to be, we're going to take care of all of that there.
Okay.
So I just wanted to add
Thank you.
that.
Thank you for that.
Thank you. Just thinking about roles, I guess, or responsibilities of somebody, you know. We were talking about lawyers earlier, you know, which is a good thing. But I was thinking about some of my, like, my own experience in my family. You know, one of my brothers, he adopted this, they were our family. And we got together as a family, and the mom is there and the father, they were unhealthy. And so even they agreed that these children could be adopted by my brother. You know, and then we went to the Children and Family Service, and we told them this is what we want. You know, I mean, we weren't going to argue. I mean, we're all on board with it as a family. And parents were, the grandparents. But I think about that, you know, when we're presenting that, you know, I think about maybe an elders council or something like that, and maybe representation from families and or nations, whatever it has to be, so that, you know, we need to have every voice heard, even the little ones, you know, and that we had that in our family discussions. They were just young, you know, and that was, you know, a few years ago, and now they're, you know, they kept in touch with the other family, but they know who they are, and they're good, healthy children, you know. And, so I just wanted to bring that up, you know, when they're talking about this, and, you know, those are some of the things that just come to mind sometimes. But when we're talking about how moving ahead, you know.
Always good. Okay, I'm gonna go to the next one for April. All right, so this is our, I was gonna say fun bureaucratic position, but then that doesn't sound like I'm selling it very well. If I just put fun in front of it. So, my Mac is gonna, do you want the charger's right there. It's die soon.
Your phone? Your phone? Is it your phone or your
Computer.
Okay.
Yeah. All right, so the Regional Child and Family Advocate was that position that was on that little float that was on the regional side. So this position is responsible for hiring and overseeing the Child and Family Advocates, the SWAR managers, and the Child Safety Team. And also will oversee quality assurance functions, and will be a senior staff representative working with the Representative Council. So they're actually they're sitting in on the Representative Council, listening to what the communities have to say and ensuring that the practice within each of the communities and across the territory matches those visions that are coming out of the Representative Council. This position is super important as we think of that minimum standard that Chris mentioned, substantive equality. This person is making sure that no matter where you live across the territory, you don't just have a bad CO rep in your territory or something going on. Like, this person is making sure that all of those standards are high. They're the ones really having those conversations at those higher levels and making sure that they're being actionable at that ground level. So it's a position that really we do need to run this organization. We kind of have to establish it through our law. So that is the Regional Child and Family Advocate. And I think that's actually all that I am, and I think that's someone else is taking over from me right now. What's the next slide, April?
it's Cedar.
Yeah.
Child plans.
Where did Cedar? Cedar! It's you!
Thank you, Erica. You're up.
You're it. Oh, here.
Cedar, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I'll start by introducing myself because I'm new to the SIA team. Well, kind of new. I was a part of the team back in 2019 for a short period of time, just on a short secondment. So that I think was 6 months or so. And I just came back to the team recently in October, so really pretty new, 3 months in SIA, and I am a community engagement lead. My focus is with the community engagement with them, but I'm also helping out in a lot of other areas on the team. My Sechapa name is Musliat. I'm from the Satan Nation. I live out in Sartlip. I'm also from the Indigenous Nation from my mom's side. And what else can I say? I'll just stop there. I'm going to talk about child plans. So child plans are a new concept being introduced, and the idea behind child plans is really to make families the decision makers for what happens with their children. They're the foundation, really the foundation of the law, and the main purpose of them is so that to have immediately available information on who are the approved family members that can make decisions for a child should there be an emergency situation or something where, you know, who can care for your child in case of an emergency, who to contact, say the family is needs support in some way, and who can provide emergency care for your child. So under the law, all families or all children would need to have a child plan. A child plan can be created with support or without support. It'll be the role of the floor managers, so you heard a bit about floor managers before, to make sure that all families have a child plan, and also to make sure that they're up to date for children in their respective communities. What else can I say? The information that's put into child plans will be used only for these situations that we're talking about, so that the information will be secure. It would be confidential and not used in any other way. Am I forgetting anything? Yep.
I just wanted to add what Cedar is saying, and I think a lot of the times in our families, and it's not, you know, I knock on wood and I say these things out of respect for maybe the ones we've lost recently, and some of us have experienced this ourselves. We take a loss in our family, and sometimes they're young mummies or daddies. And sometimes the family members want to see a niece or nephew, or whatever that case is. There's nothing written down. Ministry will step in. It's like Indian Affairs wanting to have a say. But it's almost similar to us if we don't have a will written. But how do we say that? If somebody has a car or a bicycle or something, they should be writing it down on a piece of paper and have a will. Well, this is the same thing, and why we're doing what we're doing. There might be a separation or a divorce in a relationship. We want what's best for the child, but sometimes when our families are splitting, we want to attach the opposite partner, never mind the child. So how do you look after the best interests of the child, and that's creating the safety plan? Culturally, what's the male's role, what's daddy's role, and what's mommy's role? I think those are trying to make sure that we're covering. And a decision is made when we're happy, healthy, thinking about the child. That's what where that one's coming from. I just add that piece.
In your child in place of a family member, how long do you see that process being? Just for example, I recently lost my children to MCFD under investigation, still running court. At the beginning, I was told that I can have them placed in family while I wait for court. Well, happened in October, February now. I've been phoning them constantly to ask them. I gave them 5 names to see where it's at, and so that my children, they weren't supposed to be separated. They were supposed to be placed with a family member. None of that's gone through yet. do you see that going for this program, like for the waiting period before they're placed and not separated
Yeah.
and they're, how do they go about seeing that my children would be safe with that person?
Yeah.
Yep. Sorry, I went out of my page.
You go for it.
Yeah, thank you. My brother here, in my safety plan says, my son, if I'm able to care for him, whether I'm out, something's happened or I do something that's gonna have people question me, his safety plan would put my son here with my brother. Automatically, it would kick in. My child is safe, is in the community. My brother's already agreed to take care of our child. So until an investigation or that process follows through, the child will come back to me, or I'm back in the child's life. So it would be, that's what the safety planning is all about. It's automatic. And a lot of the times I'd like to say that we shouldn't have to do the family court or the court process through MCFD. Our plan would kick in. So if there will be a wait, let's say it this way. If I didn't have my safety plan and brother turns around and says, no way, I'm not doing that, and I don't have anywhere else to go, and I don't identify, there will be a gap in that process. So I think it's going to be important that we do have something written. Sorry, add to that.
And I realize it's getting a bit late, so we're trying to move quickly, but in our system, which I will talk about in the last 3 sections, in your case, this would have gone to your family, not to MCFD or the court system to make the decision. And if you had a child plan that said, if something happened to you, then someone in your family was the person that we should be talking to, and this is the family that could take care of the children, that's what's supposed to happen. We are not looking at the foster home system, and we're not looking at removal in the traditional way. So it would be a different experience. And so it goes back to the question around some families as well, but I think we have measures in to deal with.
What if you didn't have family to, so there's no foster system within SIA? Like if there wasn't a family, like if you had a, like me personally, I have a very small family. And if there was no family member to take my things, what would be the next step?
I will get to that, but,
Okay.
but really the family would be the ones making the decision around that, and the child and family advocate who is involved has some knowledge of the family.
Or is it something like first, like say a suit, is it something that E12 would be doing with?
We are going to inherit both surrounding by Cedar and these law, which have significant foster systems and children in care. And so that will be part of our system and we'll have to evolve from there.
I also just want to acknowledge what Chris was saying when we were going through definitions, is that within our law, we've actually defined family very differently than colonial law, and we've broadened it out extremely. Like really it's whoever a child has an emotional connection to. So for those who don't have family and thinking of the urban community and chosen family, it's saying if you have a neighbor who they're your kid's auntie, they're not their blood auntie by any means, but they're their auntie, they could be identified through this process to support someone. So it's supporting the networks that are already around, but then also having safeguards if someone has just moved here and it has entered a crisis as well.
And then is this organization going to be covering payments?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. Next one.
We also have a QR code coming soon that will lead you to a sample child plan for you to look at to see what it'll look like. So it's not quite ready yet, but it'll be posted up soon.
My sweater.
Scan that.
Which sweater is yours?
So the next section is 9.4. You can see that it's really short, and it's adoptions. So adoptions could be formalized in the longhouse, through the longhouse gathering. And it would not sever the child's relationship with their biological parents. And this is a section that we need to have more discussions about and ask the communities, do we want to include adoptions under this legislation?
So that would take place of the 5401?
Good.
Okay. And then SIA would cover the payments to that family through the adoption, just like a 5401.
That's all I have to say about this one. If anyone has any questions?
Unless anyone has questions for Cedar, we'll move on to the next one. And the next section is section 9, the longhouse process. And why this is important is the key points in this is about the longhouse process of the family meetings. And having meetings that support the children, having everyone gather into larger groups to create yourself a family plan for the child safety. It doesn't have to happen in a longhouse setting. Just bringing the family together, plan for the child, bringing everyone together, and key points is like about family meetings is you can request support from all the family members to come together and come together and like creating the safety plan for your child. Bringing all, like I said, bringing all the family together to create something that you'll have a backup plan, and you won't have to, like they're just mentioning now, going over that safety plan right away when you can, so you don't have to go through the long process of waiting and waiting and waiting for someone to, give you the go-ahead saying this is who's going to take care of your kid, and they say no, then they run to the foster system. So, getting everyone together right away so we can create some type of safety plan for the child. And, identifying who the family head is in your family is really crucial as well as getting everyone together. You know who to talk to about the process that you have to do, and creating a plan, like who would be the best person, the safest person for your child. So getting the family head together is to gather for a meeting. Like about the longhouse gathering as well. Having witnesses like you guys here right now, witnessing the process and helping us as well as your guys' way of, you guys know the best interests of your child as well. So having everyone here as a witness is, what we go through in our cultural ways, bringing everyone together to witness the process of what we're going to be doing and the work that we're doing, and gathering all together to come as one to figure out what it is that we need for the child and the safety plan. Also, the floor managers, they're the ones who support the families. They're the ones who will be talking for the families, and also helping assist and create a child plan. And and the next one is we need your feedback. Is do you have any worries about how this new system will work? Do you think your family would be able to solve issues through this process?
I see it as, looking at it, how would you go about, like, what if you come from multiple families, multiple nations, but you're a band member of another? So would that make that person liable for any of those nations to rely on becoming part of CF? You know what I mean?
I'd like to say yes, simply because if we're in the region, you're in Victoria, and you create a safety plan, the child could be linked to here in Saanich or in Victoria, or what we're identifying as urban, but has links.
Yeah.
As long as those families are identified, we can include them in a discussion like this, as long as we're focused on the role of the safety of the child. Now, it could be entities from each family, or it could be, as it's indicated, brother might say, no, I want to say I'm the leader of my family, and he has final say. But as long as we understand, uncle makes a decision, brother makes a decision, that's the law. I can't go walk up that door and go, I don't agree with the guy. I'm going to try to appeal it somehow. That was my safety plan for my child. See what I mean?
Yeah.
So we have to understand it. So in this case, we can say, all 4 grandparents want to be involved.
Yeah.
As long as we know we're going to support mom or dad for the process in the best interest of the child. Does that work? Does that answer that? Yeah.
Okay. Keep going.
Sorry,
Okay.
where are you at, Chuck?
Back.
Your intervention. There you go.
Okay.
That's where you are.
So, through all of this, I just want to make clear, because we've been a little sloppy with terms here. So, we have 2 plans that are defined in the Act. One is the child plan. That is the one that's mandatory for all children, that identifies who SIA and the community should be identifying as significant people in that child's life if there needs to be someone to talk to. That's mandatory, but it's not, it has nothing to do with child protection or child welfare or any of that. It's just telling us the system so that when, as Bruce said, when there's a crisis in a family, it doesn't default to professionals to make decisions. We've already identified who the family is. The other one, when we get into the concept of intervention, there are times when children are safe. And so we have, unfortunately, 2.5 pages of definition of what are the criteria on which we can make interventions in family. And this is pulled from Cowichan and Cowicess and MCFD and a bunch of different places. We went through a process and we talked about what are those things that make a child unsafe. And some of ours are different than what's in Child Family Community Service Act. Some are saying if a child is in the community away from their parents that are at risk and the parent is not able or willing to do something, that child is at risk. That's got not necessarily anything to do with the parent, but we want children to be safe. And so we've gone through a long definition. I think they may actually be on the slides. I'm not going to go through them all. They are in the Act, and they will be in, this is going to be published as an overview document within hopefully the next week or 2, and it will be a condensed version of the Act, and you can see what the definitions of the need of intervention are. So that, I mean, that's a really brief discussion about it, but just to be able to have a legal process process, you have to have a definition you can work under, and so you have to actually define what puts a child at risk. Otherwise, see, it doesn't have any legal authority to be involved with families. So that's what that's about. And then,
Sorry, Chuck.
Yeah.
I just wanted to add, I think if, I don't know how I'm gonna link this, but I just wanted to link it somehow that if there was something happening in our community and we need to train ourselves up as we're doing this too.
Yeah.
So where's our safe houses right now? Where is that, what is it, respite? Or whatever they call it, respite? So now if I'm taking on all these children and I'm trying to help someone, or I have these children, but I need help,
Yeah.
where can I bring them for the weekend?
Yeah.
We don't have that. So I think what we need to do is create an inventory and have a pool that says, I have respite, here's who are the people that are certified, and we can get them going. But at the same time, where's our First Nations Nchano Safe House in Victoria? We don't have one. Where's the one for the Kwakwaka'wakw Nations? We don't have one. So where are those? And I think those are the goals that we need to be starting to establish that. Or if our women are hurt in relationships to have children, where do they go? We need to be able to have the hard discussions. Not that we're wishing that on anybody, but those are what we need to do. And I think through these plans allow us to do it, but it's also saying a safe house for a couple or a parent needs to have parenting, it needs to have counseling, it should have money management, it should be time management, there's going to be parenting courses. All of those things need to be established. And they should be culturally relevant to who we are. And it shouldn't be something we're just getting certified or with a diploma and telling people this is what these are the criteria, because I think inside MCFD, and this is my own words, but I feel like if they open a file, they keep moving the goalposts. And our families can't catch up to that post. How are we supposed to score? And if those things are happening, I think it's up to us to create the field, anchor the net down, and here's how we establish goals together. So, anyway, sorry, I just wanted to add that.
I would just like to add an idea.
Yeah.
Because I was raised as a youth on the Muckleshoot Reservation over in Washington. And what they had many years ago was they had like a home in the community that the kids could go to. And people in the community could like go have dinners there. And it would be staff. And so that way families in the community could spend time with their kids. And they'd all be in like, it was kind of like a group home, but it was managed by the community. So, and I just remember as a youth, we'd go over there and spend time with the kids that were there and have dinners or hang out and whatever.
No, that's great. And April, one of her pieces of work is to do that inventory that Bruce is talking about, and we did a visit to Chehalis, and they have some interesting programs there where, you know, if there's an abusive parent, the parent is actually out of the house briefly, children are set up in a house, and then the parents are brought back in with the kinds of supports that Bruce was talking about. The big challenge they told us they're having there is that most of the families they're trying to deal with have addictions issues, especially drugs. And they think it's very hard to do treatment when they can walk out the door and get 2 doors down that floor. So, yeah, we're looking at all that stuff. And so if you've got more ideas, talk to April.
Yeah.
I wrote it down.
Surrounded by Cedar and Nitua are working under the provincial legislation, and in the new system they would work under our legislation, and we would be the one, so they would be doing this law, not the Child Family Community Service Act, and they would be under our jurisdiction. So they are a service delivery agency. They're not a governance body or an oversight body. So they would be, they're some of the groups that would continue to do work, and we're thinking ideally as we start to shift away from removals in foster homes to offer now would be support to families to provide the care that children need. That's the idea. So,
Sorry, can I just jump in on, sorry. Hurry up, I'm gonna go. But I just wanted to add to that piece, I think if I looked at South Island Indigenous Authority as an umbrella, we're the umbrella, and right now the umbrella is the province, and they're the ones that feed the prevention dollars to these service providers. Well, what we're gonna do is take these agencies, that's run by Cedar and Hulitan, and we're gonna put them under our umbrella, so we're the governing body that serves the dollars down to the prevention program, so we're not taking away the programs. And in fact, I think we're gonna enhance the dollars that are coming to agencies like this, probably twofold. We're gonna enhance the dollars so we can actually build cultural relevant programs and get more programs in our communities for the things that we need to wanna identify. So it's gonna enhance it.
okay. Thank you. So, yes,
For the safety plan, that can include like not only the harm of children, but like, let's say one of the parents' health for issue, one gets cancer or something, and for me, I've got spinal stenosis. I've reached out to all these agencies for help prior to my children being apprehended. I wouldn't get any help because I didn't have MCFD under me. I couldn't access, stuff that somebody to bring my child to school. So this program with the safety
it's
plan,
ideally not,
I would have access to the help that I needed immediately, not after.
that's the ideal.
Yeah.
We have to see how it works in terms of our ability to deliver that, and partially depends on what, like Bruce said, in terms of the kind of funding we get and how we're able to redirect some of the funding. I mean, I've been away for 12 years from MCFD, but I came from that system, and about 30 to 35% of the funding goes to foster homes, and it's not that foster parents aren't great people, but you're spending a third of your dollars on people caring for someone's kids rather than using that money to help families to care for the kids themselves. So I think there are flexible ways of enhancing the support services, and I think indications right now, at least with the current governments, I am watching the election cycles, but with the current governments is that there's a commitment to do this right and to get more funding to Indigenous communities. So,
I just wanted to add that there is a very explicit clause within our legislation that says a child will never be removed because of the health of the parents, the poverty of the parents, anything like that. That is not ever a reason that a child will be removed from their parents.
Under this or?
against law.
Okay.
So, when we're saying there is a safety system for children, what happens is the only way to trigger that is that there is a finding that the child is in need of intervention, right? And that was what I talked about before, the 2.5 pages of definition. So, if there is a report, whether it's from within a family, a self-report, which would be unusual, or someone in the community saying a child is not safe, we will have a group that's called the Child Safety Team, and their only role, and this is very different from NCFD, the only role is to look at that in need of intervention list and say, there's 3 of these that are risks to this child. And once they've done that, they refer those things to the family to resolve. And so that's why the child plan is so crucial, is because you need to know right away who do we need to involve in, there's 3 things that are putting this child at risk. Who do we need to involve in coming up with a solution for that? So the Child Safety Team only does assessments. They don't refer, they don't make decisions, they just do assessment. They then pass that assessment off to the family head, and it's also copied to the relevant child and family advocate. And so the family head, and there will be supports for this system, will have then the responsibility to pull together the family meeting, the longhouse meeting, and to look at those things that were identified in the child safety assessment and say, this is how we as a family will solve this. And this is actually really similar to a New Zealand process that came out of the Maori teachings called Family Group Conferencing. That's sort of the spiritual, it's different, but it's the spiritual basis of this, which is allowing families without not professionals to come up with solutions to the family issues. And then out of that would come a safety plan, and the safety plan would say, you've identified these 3 issues, this is how we're going to take care of them in our family, in our own way, with the people that we have. These are the supports we need for this to be successful, we would do that. We talk about the role of witnesses, and Bruce would raise this, so we would like each family, and when you're dealing with the safety plan, that the family identify witnesses in this process, because we don't want the very few professionals we have to be the ones peeking in on families and trying to say, this is working. Bruce talks all the time about family being really good at saying, you know, you said you were going to stop drinking and I saw you last night. And that's not good enough because you committed to not do this in the family life. And so that's the role of witnesses. It's an official role. And again, there would be some compensation attached to this. And then the role of the child and family advocate is to provide support. The only thing they do is when the family has come up with their safety plan, the child and family advocate has to look at it and say, yes, we identified these 3 risks, you have come up with solutions for them, I'll sign off on this. And so there's no rule other than that, unless the family isn't able to come up with solutions. And if the family can't come up with solutions, then the child and family advocate can either send it back to the family and say, try again. You know, Uncle Harry lives downstairs and he is beating up the kids when he's drunk, and you've still got Uncle Harry living down there, and I don't see how you've solved it. So how are we going to deal with this? They could send it back. If the family is completely incapable of coming up with a solution, then the child and family advocate has to work with, in your case, it would be the Council of Indigenous Guests, and say, we've got a problem here, how can we solve this? And so, that's the system as we're seeing it. There are no, I mean, the child and family advocate's sort of a super social worker in some ways, but they're not really. And there are no social work positions in this structure. There's not a lot of professionals. It's really relying on us supporting families to make decisions. Any comments, questions, outrage, anything?
Brings to mind the child that was in Fort Alberta that got put back with his parents, and the same thing happened when they ended up dead.
Yeah.
So it's
And so when we've talked about it, I mean, and yes, I'm really aware of that, and there's been other cases, and that's been the downfall, really, of Indigenous child welfare programs in Canada for 30 years, is cases where they haven't really addressed the risk, or they've addressed the risk in the wrong way, and so no system is perfect, but the idea is that the family head and the witnesses should be involved in this and saying, you know, this isn't working. And ideally, if they don't see the system of identifying in need of intervention as a punitive one, it just pops back to the family to decide. And if you think, you know, my neighbor's got the little boy and I don't think they're being very good with him, ideally, either you talk to the family head or you feel comfortable enough that it's not gonna be social workers barging in and pulling the child out. It's, we want community, it's one of our goals in this actually is to have community take joint responsibility for the welfare of the children in their community. Take it away from professional social workers like me and put it in the hands of the community and the family, and we think they can do a much better job. Any other questions?
If I could just add, I think that's where we all need to be prepared to, because it's not, we're not gonna make popular decisions as uncles or aunties. And if we're as part of the circle as witnesses to the work, we have to really be conscientious of the decision we're making because there are lives. And when we said we can't just defer it, we're going to be making decisions internally, and I think that's what we're trying to prevent too. And the agencies that are providing services are more for prevention. They're going to be the ones trying to help and counseling and things like that. But ultimately, the decisions will fall on us, and the accountability is on us to try to make the best decisions for the child.
Okay.
Other question?
Yeah, no, I was thinking about the whole process, you know, about the Western concepts versus the traditional.
Yeah.
You know, and I know like government always push their way, or, you know, I think about, you saying there's not gonna be no social workers, you know, and, I really think about that because, you know, how are we gonna, well, you know, I just think about how is it gonna develop or how is it gonna come about? Because I know one of the things that always comes up is like certification or this or that, you know, and it's always gotta be, you know, no recognition for our way kind of thing. You know, I think about like our traditional healers. You know, we got them a little bit of recognition for a while, but, you know, and on the same level as say nurses and doctors, but they're our way, you know. I just bring that up, you know, thinking about it because, you know, I think about just the way our way, our families are structured and the way, you know, how we all each play a role in it, you know. You know, when we have a celebration for a 1-year-old, I heard the comments like, well, hey, that person, he won't remember, she won't remember. But it wasn't about that child, it was about how our responsibility about, you know, we need to recognize that, that's what it's about. Everyone's responsibility to that child.
Yeah.
You know, I just share that and, you know, it's important to bring recognition to, you know, to things like that. I mean, it happens all across the board, not only with healers, but language speakers and whatnot. And,
Yeah, we believe that there is more wisdom in the community in terms of how and family on how to care for children than there is in a professional system. When I was a little rash when I said there'd be no social workers. There will still be social workers doing helping functions. So Hulitan has social workers and the NFC has social workers. So there will be helpers, but there's not the professional child protection structure that we are used to. And because we believe that hasn't worked. I believe in my heart that it hasn't worked. So the sorry.
There was like long ago, I don't know if it's relevant or not, but long ago, my kids were just school age. They told us they were sending in social workers to their school to go and talk to them. And I don't know how Bobby found out, but he found out that they could only talk to them if an ETOL worker was present. And because the worker couldn't get there in time, their conversation was void.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, if I don't want to degrade the skills that most social workers have, I don't think they're being used in a very helpful way at the moment, and so just think we need a different way of approaching this. And I think, as Bruce says, I mean, the traditional culture wasn't perfect. Children still had issues then, but it worked way better for your communities than what we imposed on you. So this is an attempt to rebuild that in some way.
And I think part of that too is that when you have social workers, your heart starts pounding different. They have the jurisdiction or the stroke of a pen. They come on reserve. It's like you almost got your guards up. Well, I think that's what we're saying is that there's no more of that we want to do that ourselves. And it's not that we're going to be removing children or apprehending children. We're going to change that wording around. And our children, you know what, if they, like you're saying, if they have a voice, but if there's a process in which we're hearing them that we're not feeling violated, I think that's what we need to establish through our discussion. So I'm not running to the school just to circumvent you so I can hear something. Does that make sense? And I think when they're trying to do that, they are trying to help by saying, maybe parents are influencing, I just want to talk to baby or child myself. But I think it can get misconstrued along the way, and now we're all defensive. Who are you to come in and talk to me about my child? And who are you to talk to my child without my consent? Or then we'll even frown at the agencies that should have been there. So I think we're working on it. But I just wanted to add that it needs to be continued to be dialogue. Thank you.
You know, I mean, one of the pieces I carry a lot of things with me from my years of doing is I think also of a young woman who came up to me, and I had been a social worker, and I didn't remove very many kids, and I got in trouble for it, but I did remove kids, but always, if it was on a First Nation, it was with consent of the land administration, who said the family was not a safe place for the children, and they didn't have another suggestion. But I was at a conference, an early years conference in Nanaimo, and this young woman came up to me who was quite striking, with quite orange hair and stuff, but and she said, "Do you remember me?" And I said, "No, I don't." And she said, "Well, my name is," and she gave me her name, and she said, "You saved my life. You took me out of a situation where I wouldn't be here today if you had left me in it." And so it's not necessarily that the whole system is bad and people have bad ideas. She was a very unusual young woman who actually prospered away from her family. And I think she had a lot of issues even though she had done a lot. So we need to make sure children are safe, as Bruce is saying that, and we can't look at culture as solely the way to protect children. That's why we've got a system that we designed that says there has to be safety in there, and if a family is not capable of coming up with a way of protecting the child, which should be very, very rare, but if they're simply not because of whatever reason, then you have to have a check and balance where you say, well, we need to give this back to the community because the family's not doing it. Is that okay? You haven't heard this before, so I'm just sort of waiting for you to pop up and say, where's that coming from? Okay. So we only have one more section to go, and I really feel bad for the little yeah, and so I feel bad in this because we haven't actually, we've got a group of aunties who have been wonderful mentors and teachers for us, and Bruce talked about them briefly, and they have, it's a wonderful group of women who come together to share their knowledge with us. And we put them in the dispute resolution system without actually asking if they wanted to be in there, so, it was sort of because we had to come up with a system to write in the law, and it's not necessarily the system that we should have. But the thing is with law, as our law student will tell us, if we want to ask her, if we don't have a system where, if somebody we talked about, one of the members of the family says this isn't fair, the family has made a terrible decision, and I'm not happy with this. You have to have some system where they can actually make that complaint and be heard. And so if we don't include it in the law, then the provincial court system becomes that by default. And so we're pushed to have some kind of dispute resolution system. And so what we've suggested, that we will be suggesting in this booklet when it comes out, is we look at several options. One is ANTI, where the communities and depending on their connections with the families, some would have to say I shouldn't be part of this in terms of I'm not neutral, I have too many connections, but we would have a group of these wonderful people coming together, and they would be like the court system. They would say, actually this system was fair, or no, this wasn't, you need to consider this. Another group, we thought we can do the same thing with an elders council. We also can do the same thing with a subgroup of the representative council. There's lots of options, and we're not sure which one makes the most sense, ideally, but we do need to have it. And so we're really open to feedback on that one, in terms of who do you think, if there's a council of last say, if they're like the court system in your community, who should actually sit on that?
How about having it from each age group, rather than all elders or all entities? How about just a difference of each age group? Because then our understanding where the families are coming from, because the families are getting younger and younger these days.
That's an interesting idea. Yeah, okay. Any other comment, suggestions? No? Okay, you've been very patient and very appreciative. And so, I don't know if anyone on our team has any last comments, or if any of you have any last comments for us. Use your own.
I just want to say thank you once again, lift my hands, Siyatala Haitseevka, thanking you once again for your time. And for those of you that don't know who Chuck is, a lot of the times in our culture we have a speaker that's blanketed in our homes. And our blanketed speaker, sometimes using the language, needs a translator. And sometimes we have a translator that's able to echo the words and the feelings of our family when they come into the home like this. So this being said, we actually went down and chased Chuck. He was one of them, MCFD, Ministry of Children and Families. And I actually sat across from him when I was a chief. And we didn't have very good conversations. But I learned to trust this man and utilize, asked him about a retirement to come and work for us and be our translator. Because he understands the legislation, he understands the process around how they do business in the legislative building, the role of the minister, the deputy minister, the assistant deputy minister, down to the director, and how the funding formula works in the province, the methodology, and how things are being done, the liabilities within the jurisdiction. Some of those things that are being discussed is what we're asking Chuck to come forward and help us establish our own jurisdictional law that says we've never relinquished our inherent right and how we can take care of our own children. And we'll do a better job than they've ever done trying to look after us. So, if you're looking at Chuck going, who's this guy? Please understand he's becoming our writer and understanding how that, what it says in the law, and he's taking our understanding and putting it on a document that they would understand how to read it. So that's kind of maybe, if we're taking a little longer too, we're trying to grapple with him and give him a cross-cultural awareness and understanding of what we're doing. Because he still looks at it through a Hulitan lens sometimes, if I can see it. So, sorry Chuck. But I say thank you to you all. I thank Chuck. I thank the staff of the Southdown Business Authority. I think there's some awesome work going on. I'm proud of it. I feel good about it. And you know what? More importantly, I think we're leaving a legacy for the unborn children of our families. And one day they're going to look back and they're going to say, you know what? I think those are my people looking out for me. Because when a child's file is open, when they turn 19, they're going to come back and look at it and say, who is in that file? I was terrified of that when I was a chief, knowing that I was supposed to be the band designated, the band advocate, the one responsible for helping making decisions for that child's cultural family connection. And children are yet coming of age that were in care when I was the chief. And I've had one approach me already, similar to the story Chuck just mentioned. But I want them to be success stories, and I think that's all we're looking for. But unfortunately, we're on a slippery slope. We need to show the government we're still here, we're not failing, and we're surviving, and we're going to conquer the law that they tried to cover us with. We're uncovering ourselves, and we're going to sit up. So, as much as I say is thank you. I think if there's probably another engagement, is there soon?
There will be another one coming up soon. We will announce it on our Facebook.
Same time, same place tomorrow.
We have a sea of